Okay, I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's May 30th, 2023, and we're in the Aldermanic Chamber and it's 7 p.m. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Ernest Jettie.
Here.
Alderman June Karen.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien Sr. is present. And our Chairman, Alderman Richard A. Dow.
Present.
Everybody is here, Mr. Chair. Also in attendance is Lisa Foto, Public Works Director, Dan Hudson, City Engineer, John Ibera, Superintendent of the Streets, Brian Conant, Superintendent of Parks Recreation, Jeffrey LaFleur, Superintendent of Solid Waste, Dan Boucher, Superintendent of Wastewater.
And isn't your finance person here? Oh, there she is.
Okay, that's her name.
And John.
Can I have your name?
Carolyn O'Connor.
Carolyn, thank you.
John.
All right, first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to present public comment? Don't see anyone. By the way, thought the treasurer was with us. No? He leaves?
He is here.
No, I think, yeah, oh, he is here, yeah.
Hiding.
Also CFO, Mr. Griffin.
All right, no public comment. Communication,
None,
unfinished business,
there's none,
new business resolutions,
none,
new business ordinances,
there are none.
tabled in committee.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to remove from the table R-23-125, which is the pending budget.
All right, the motion on the floor is to remove R-23-125 from the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, R-23-125 is the budget. And this evening, we're going to be reviewing Public Works and Engineering. And that's departments 160, 161, 177, 168, and 169. All starts on page 193. Would you like to bring your people up? Yes. Director Photo.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Dad, members of the Budget Committee. My name is Lisa Foto. I serve as Director of Public Works. Joining me this evening is Carolyn O'Connor, our Senior Financial and Administration Manager, John Ibera, Superintendent of Streets, Dave Boucher, Superintendent of Wastewater, Dan Hudson, City Engineer, and Brian Conant, Superintendent of Parks and Recreation, and Mike Rush, our Fleet Manager. Jeff LaFleur could not be here this evening, so I'll be presenting the solid waste budget. So we're here to present the budgets for the Division of Public Works. Our increase from fiscal year 23 is 4% for our general fund departments, which include administration and engineering, streets, and parks and recreation. The total fiscal year 24 DPW budget before you tonight is $51,265,562. 25 million or 52% of that is wastewater. 11.8 million or 24% is solid waste. 8.1 million or 14% is streets. 4.1 million or 7% is parks and recreation, and 1.8 million or 3% is administration and engineering. We will present the changes in each of our budgets and of course answer questions. So with your permission, Alderman
Yes.
Dowd, we can start with administration and
Going
engineering.
to start with Department 160, Administration Engineering. Revenues on 193, appropriations on 193.
Mr. Chairman, can I just do a little clerkly duties? When you gotta speak, please identify with your name into the microphone, so when they do transcribe it can get recorded appropriately. And you might have to repeat it every time you speak, but thank you very much.
And also, when you speak, bring the microphones close, because they can't pick up if it's too far away.
Vanilla flavor.
Okay.
Except for you, we could hear you.
All right,
Mr. Chair.
yes,
So Dan Hudson, City Engineer, I'm speaking to Administration and Engineering. The proposed budget is largely the same as last year with a few changes. Notable changes would be to salaries and wages. Those are contractual adjustments. Professional services, we've increased slightly. That's to allow for, increases in contracted services, like unanticipated engineering, those sorts of things. Enables us to quickly engage someone should we need to. Property services has changed. That's due to janitorial services for the new facility primarily. And I think those are the changes. I'd be happy to address any particular questions.
okay, are there any questions for administration and engineering? Alderman Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as I've gone through this budget, we see the department's proposal, and then we see what the mayor is recommending, which is exactly the same. So what I would like to know is, and that question will be asked to all of you, is there anything within your budget that you proposed, a line item, that is more or less than what the mayor proposed? So let's say you put in $2,000 for supplies, but he only gave you $1,000. Is there anything within this line, within your budget, that you wanted something but didn't get it? So it gives us a better perspective on how to deal with the deliberations when we make our final decision as to what the budget will be. So for me, it's important to know if there were things you wanted that you didn't get. Not that you'd get it, but we certainly would like to know.
Sure, I appreciate
Thank
the
you.
question. I think Director Photo can better address it.
So,
Director Photo?
would you like me to address all of the cuts that we made, or do you want me
No,
to
you
go
can do it by
department? Okay.
Yes, please.
So, we were given, a 4% directive, we have 4%, I do appreciate that. I think we all need to do our part in order to keep, the tax rate affordable, and I think that the mayor's trying to do that. I did appreciate the opportunity to be able to choose where the cut should be made. So, in this department, we, cut $35,000 from, the staffing budget.
Okay.
And that, so we didn't cut any positions, it's just, it was a position that is vacant.
Okay, so meaning you're not looking to fill that position within this fiscal year?
That's correct, or at least not fill it, in the beginning, maybe later on.
Okay, all right, thank you. I
Mhm.
appreciate that because that gives us something to work with.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, administration, engineering? Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Photo, to your question around full-time employees, I noticed in this, and I'm gonna ask this, like my colleague Alderman Karen asks about, she asks about the budget, I ask about employees, and you
Sure.
spoke to it a little bit. In our budget book, it says you have 21 full-time employees in this department. Is the cut that you just mentioned, is that reflected? So you had 22, now you have 21?
So the position is unfunded. We didn't cut the position necessarily, but it's unfunded for this year. And we didn't, and it's really not a particular position in this case, Alderman Sullivan, it's just more out of the salary line, the
Okay,
salary and wages line.
okay.
So,
Follow up?
Sorry.
sure, go ahead.
No, no,
I
no.
was just gonna tell, I thought your next question was gonna be which positions are vacant? Is that what you're gonna ask?
Yes.
I read your mind. I'm gonna let the superintendent, I know the answer to that, but I'll let Engineer Hudson answer that.
Sure, thank you. So again, City Engineer Dan Hudson. There's currently two vacancies in engineering. We have a vacancy which became vacant on March 25th for the DPW permits coordinator position. And that was due to an internal transfer from engineering to another department. And then the other vacancy we have is one senior staff engineer position that was vacated on 5/6 of this year. So fairly recent vacancies that we hope to fill in the future.
All set, Alderman Cullen,
Could
or
I
a
have
follow-up?
a follow-up, please?
Follow-up?
It's to the line item under janitorial services, line 54,200. I see that it went from 0 to 30,000, understanding you have a new building. But you had a building this year where you currently either are or were a year ago, fiscal year '23. You didn't pay any janitorial fees for that building?
Carolyn O'Connor, the Senior Finance and Administration Manager. We had captured that before under contracted services, and now we've moved it to janitorial services. It's more appropriate.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for
And it was
that.
much less of a building.
All right, got it. Okay, so it's a new line item essentially?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
All set?
Yep.
Any other Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Sometimes it's been the tradition, when a position doesn't get filled, but you think you might rehire at some futuristic point to put into that position. Did you cover that position with $1, or just to keep that line item particularly open so that could be done? Save yourself the headache and coming up with a new line in the future.
With Carolyn O'Connor, the Senior Finance and Administration Manager. With the current system within the financial services of Lawson, we don't have to do that, to have the $1
Okay.
in there. Yeah, it would be different if we abolished a position, but we're just unfunding it.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So I see in your objectives for fiscal year '24, the completion of the West Hollis Street corridor study. What is the status of that now? How far along is that?
So Dan Hudson, city engineer, we're just getting started, so this week actually, traffic counts are occurring. They're gonna count vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. We delayed the start of the study so that we could capture counts when pedestrians and bicyclists were active in the corridor. We signed a contract, earlier this year in the winter, but we haven't proceeded yet, we're waiting on those. So we're gonna collect that data, and then we'll enter into a public process where we, seek input from residents along the corridor and go through various review of possible improvements along the corridor, come up with some concepts for improvements, be it short-term, long-term, that sort of thing. So I guess what I'd say is we're under contract, but we're just beginning because we're awaiting the data to start with.
Okay.
All set, or follow-up?
And what time do you count the bicyclists? Because I want to make sure I get out there and get counted.
Well, that's a fair question. I mean, we don't count 24/7, so I mean, it's usually we count, about a 3-hour window, about the AM peak hour, PM peak hour. I don't recall offhand if we're doing Saturday in this case. So it would be kind of consistent with the vehicular peaks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Also, well, under your fiscal year '23 highlights, you mentioned an assessment of 185 miles of sidewalk. I'm curious to find out what that assessment said.
So very good question. It said that, don't quote me on the numbers, but about half of our sidewalks are in okay condition and the other half are not. So, the process that we went through, we worked collaboratively with National Regional Planning Commission. They provided some staff during last summer, as did Public Works. Went and walked all the sidewalk in Nashua, and captured condition ratings and whatnot in a GIS-based platform. So now we have a current map of all the sidewalks in the city, and we have some sense of what the conditions of them are. The remaining steps of that effort are to start a prioritization process This study is gonna help identify what a budgetary need might be. You know, we know there's a need for funding sidewalk repairs and replacements and additions, those sorts of things, so. So that's what that was, and we'll have more information to share soon.
Thank you.
All set?
Mhm.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to street department.
Thank you. John Ibarra, Superintendent, Street Department. So on page 202 of the budget manual, I begin with the revenue stream. We're not really a profit generating entity, but if we put out old, retired, out-of-service vehicles to auction, we may see some revenue there. Also, the snow tow, again, not a money-making proposition, but has a potential. This is more just to self-sustain and carry the snow tow through the season. So due to the last season and a historical use, we were able to reduce that area from 33.5 to 28.5. Moving on to appropriations, 51 salaries and wages. Those are all contractual changes, as with line 52, the fringe benefits. 54 property services. That was a modest reduction of $939. 55 other services stayed flat, level funded. Supplies and materials, that was a significant increase of $80,197. 71 equipment, that was a $25,000 increase. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions on the street department? Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So the other night, we talked, the discussion came up about snow removal from the sidewalks. And we're talking about increasing the special account to cover unusual storms, and you know, when you have extra snow to remove. So I imagine it's very difficult for you to try to budget for snow removal, because you never know how much snow we're gonna get, but I'm assuming that the personnel that we have in the department is a fixed number for the year, right? They're there all year round, and when you have snow removal, it's those same people that are doing that. Am I
That's
correct
correct.
about that?
That's correct.
So, I don't know how you would answer, but I guess, you know, the question that came up was, you know, how, whether we can do a better job removing snow from sidewalks, especially in school areas. And, so, you know, it came up that there was one school that was mentioned, in particular Elm Street, for example, where some kids had a near miss because the sidewalk was not, the snow had not been removed from the sidewalk. So, how do you think we can deal with that? How can we do a better job, you know, removing snow from the school areas? Because I don't see it as just a problem of an unusual storm. It seems like every storm, you know, the sidewalks are the last things. You know, you do the streets first and then the sidewalks.
That's correct.
But, you know, do you have any suggestions or any ideas? And since we're talking about the budget, do you have enough people to take care of that problem?
So it's a multifaceted question, but I'm also aware of the situation on Elm Street you speak of. That particular piece of sidewalk was something that we don't normally clear. So number one priority after we get done removing snow from the streets is the sidewalks. That is where the guys go first. And even though they have a designated range where they work, routes, they go to the school zones first, and we do 1,000 feet in all directions from the schools. Then they go into their primary runs. All right, so that is our priority. And we will keep doing sidewalks right around the clock until another storm comes in. So some storms, you have 5 days to keep going. Other times it's back-to-back storms, you might get a day or two, an extended event. So there are fatigue factors, manpower issues, you know, guys going home after 16 hours or 30 hours. So it depends on the event, really. That being said, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got, right? So we're always entertaining discussion and looking at technology and ways to achieve more. But doing what we do now, we say we do 50 miles of sidewalk. Love to do more if we could, and we make every effort to do that. So just know that our guys are out there. And these are the same guys that are running the trucks. So if they're out in the truck for 30 hours, we're calling out the overtime, they get right out of the truck and go right in the sidewalk tractor. So, does that answer your question? At least part one.
Well,
I
it gives
wanna-
me more information than I had.
Oh, yes,
Lisa,
Director?
Photo Director of Public Works, I'd like to just add to that. So the same people who are plowing, as the superintendent said, are also having to pick up trash sometimes the next day. They're exhausted, so sometimes there's a bit of a break. They need a break before they can get into a sidewalk tractor, because they're just really, really tired. The other thing is, I think we do actually a really good job plowing the school sidewalks. There are some that are a challenge, Lock Street, Kinsley, West Hollis, and that's because there are so many obstructions in the sidewalk that we can't get a sidewalk tractor through there. So we have to manually remove the snow with equipment. So that takes a little bit longer to do, as well. So those are just some of the challenges that we're dealing with. We do 50 miles, I think we do that very well. I think we're at capacity with 50 miles. I don't think we could do any more than that. Just from what the superintendent said, there's fatigue. If there's a back-to-back snowstorm, we're challenged to do even the 50 miles of sidewalks. So, it's a tough job. But I think we do a relatively good job. If we were gonna do additional, we'd have to hire a contractor. And that's proven very, very difficult. You'll see in the street department budget, we cut $25,000 out of snowplow contractors this year and put it in a guardrail line, because we can't find contractors. It's very difficult. There aren't contractors around that have sidewalk tractors that are, waiting to plow snow for us. So it's a real challenge. We certainly could try to put out a contract, but I am not hopeful that we would get any bidders. So
All set?
I just wanted to add to that.
If I could follow. So without hiring a contractor, you'd have to hire extra personnel who maybe not have any, they wouldn't have anything to do other times. I mean, it's difficult to have to staff for a time when you need more people,
Right.
and then, to keep them busy when there isn't a snowstorm.
Right.
That's correct.
Right. So that's why you're talking about a contractor who could come in.
Right.
Okay,
And
thank
it's
you.
been proposed that you do it during the storm. Can't do it, we wing to the right, so a lot of the sidewalks are getting buried as we go around. So you really do have to wait until the storm is done.
All set? Alderman
Thank you.
O'Brien?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Rivera, it probably would help out the aldermen if they understood CFR 90, which is the DOT regulations, and how much time that these guys can spend in the truck. I know probably, I'm not gonna say we violate, I know the city of Nashua is 100% legal and everything else, but sometimes, the feds have a standard of how much a driver can actually drive before he needs a break. Do you want to explain that? And that could delay the sidewalks and everything.
So that's a great question, but I don't have the set hours. We're not federally mandated. We're kind of exempt as a municipality.
Well, that's
So-
good then, so that allows you.
Yeah, so.
But still, I imagine you take safety into
Oh,
account.
sure. Yeah, they get downtime, they get breaks, and they chow, whatever they need. If you're tired, you get rested up.
So, question, we have, to hire, you're short right now of CDL drivers, correct?
Correct, we're actively interviewing. We brought 2 on the last BPW. Had 2 just before that, so we are actively interviewing and hiring.
So, people with CDL are also, our bus system is short because school bus companies are hiring at a much higher rate. And I just saw in the paper today, there's a small town north of Concord paying $35 an hour for them to start. I don't think we
A
started.
bus, it might be federal money, or are you
It
talking
was
school
city,
buses?
it was for, it didn't say what they were doing, it just needed a CDL on drivers, truck drivers.
So, if I may, my experience, Johnny Barra, Superintendent of Streets, through this interviewing, that's one of my questions. Why do you want to work for the city of Nashua? What are you making now? What are your perks, benefits? Because I want to sell the position, I want to get them on board. So the last guy I had, he was at $28 an hour, no vacation the first year, no benefits. So our package alone with the health benefits, the pension, we were within $2 or $24.87 for truck driver, and he was,
Okay,
so we're close. And the benefits outweigh.
Alderman O'Brien, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just wanted, looking at this snow towing violations, just to give you let the cat out of the bag, eventually, this automatic board's got to wrangle overnight parking. Whether it be happens or not, it's got to come to the whim of the board, their vote at the time. Are you prepared to handle that? Because I would imagine with more vehicles in the street that you'll be able to have that. Or what I'm saying is probably best as we get close, start watching, like in my committee infrastructure, to which I want to call you guys in and have you have an input on this. So we will be better prepared when that does come.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak to that, that's a sensitive subject for me. I get very concerned when we talk about overnight parking on streets, especially where it's really not needed, because it impedes our ability to pick up trash and plow streets. So I would ask that that's considered very carefully.
Oh, there's a whole wait. I mean, we're not even close yet. And it's because the legitimate questions that you just
Right.
brought up. Absolutely.
All set? Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. So I had a couple of questions. I appreciate how hard you guys work in the winter. I know there's a ton, and my family is all CDL. They work for Esplin, so I know what those safety concerns are. I think that what I was interested in was around the radius of the schools, because I think the crux of the issue here is not necessarily whether you're working hard. You are working very hard, but it is how do we keep the safety up? Because I've almost coming to City Hall, people are walking on Kingsley because there's no way. And the radius for walkers is 2 miles, and you said you start with 1,000. So when do we get to the 2 miles where the kids are walking from Elm Street? And I know it's a staffing thing, but I think maybe this isn't the forum, but the conversation around how do we increase the safety for people, especially around the schools, is it's not easy. I know you said it was multifaceted, but
It is, and it's duly noted. We can make every effort. We can't predict the weather, and I can't predict how many tractors I'm gonna be able to run at any given storm.
Yeah.
Sometimes on those events, I'll get 1, 2 guys that wanna stay. Sometimes I'll get 8 tractors out the door.
yeah.
You have to offer it, and they have the ability to say yes or no. And depending on how they're feeling, I run with what I have. Always open to suggestion. Somebody comes up with an idea,
I don't know if I'm gonna solve it right now, but I think that's been, around the horseshoe as someone who was downtown, every day and, walked from my office, I saw what it was like.
so being a superintendent, I can suggest that we work further away from the schools when we're there.
All
We're
set?
ours.
All set?
No, I have a couple more, if
All
I
right.
could, thank you. I would appreciate continuing that conversation at some point. The other question I had, you started to talk about it, but then you didn't necessarily give any detail, was that your supplies and materials are up 80,000?
Mhm.
Is that salt was more expensive? Where is that coming from?
Salt was more expensive, yes. We reallocated some funding to stay within the 4%. If if you wanna dive right into it. Repairs of vehicles and maintenance. One moment.
You're looking at 204, yes?
I got out of the shop without my glasses, so bear with me.
It's okay. I was looking for a summation.
Okay, so, yeah, roughly 30,000 there. That's 54600. Traffic signal controls, that's 20,000 more. That's buying components for the cabinets and cameras for engineering program, detection cameras. Pretty close.
Follow-up?
If I could, is the extra maintenance because we have an aging fleet or just because things are costing more?
Well, things are costing more, and through our surf program, we've managed to upgrade a good portion of the fleet, but that is, as you know, an ongoing program, trying to stay ahead of it. But we've reduced our backline units,
Okay.
but the vehicle parts are increased dramatically, if you can even get some. And if there's anything that my fleet manager would like to add to that, he's along for the ride tonight.
How you
All
doing?
set? Alderman Karen, did you have a question?
Yeah, typical question. Is there any line item here that you were looking to increase but got reduced? I see, I made notes on how much you've improved, increased on some of these maintenance.
So, this is my 7th season, I believe. I'm comfortable with what I have here, but we did leave 2.5 drivers unfunded this year. Now, last year, we had a mason and a driver not funded, not abolished, so they're sitting on the side.
So they're
We
not
could
funded.
reinstate them in the future.
Okay.
And then as you go through operations, you figure what works and where we can cut or hold back.
Okay,
So this year, it's 2.5 drivers.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for streets? Seeing none?
I don't mean to, insert myself where I shouldn't be, but it looked like the fleet manager was about to say something when you went to Alderman Karen. I don't mean to put him on the spot. I didn't know if he had something he wanted to add.
Mike Rush, Fleet Manager. I was just gonna comment that, parts and supplies have gone up because of, there was still some stuff that was shorted. It was hard to get chips and stuff like that. That drove the market up considerably in the beginning of the year. It's kind of stabilized now, and actually it's started to come down a little bit in some areas. But the reason for the increase on that 54600 line is because of the parts increase from, I think it's still coming out of COVID, driving up the prices. The price of diesel fuel, the price of manufacturing has gone up, so that's kind of where that increase in parts and supplies has come from.
I think you'll see when police and fire come in, theirs have gone up too. Same reason.
Yeah, it seems to be across the board.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, now we'll go on to Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec is revenue on 197, appropriations on 198.
Good evening, everyone. Brian Conant, Superintendent of Parks and Recreation. There's an increase in miscellaneous revenue that's due to a new cell phone tower that's going to be installed over at Holman Stadium this September. Uh, 51 salaries and wages. That's going to increase due to contractual increases and an increase in what we pay our seasonal staff at our pools, our lifeguards. 52 is a contractual increase. 53 has not increased, that's gonna stay the same. 54, we recently went out and put out to bid a portable toilet contract throughout the park system. We have several, it's over 40, I forget the exact number, portable toilets that go out on a seasonal basis, and the cost of that went from $89 a month to $110. So that's that's part of the increase. The other increase is just cost of materials and supplies.
Okay. Any questions?
I'm not done yet, sorry,
sorry.
Alderman Dowd. 55, we recently installed a central irrigation system in 15 of our biggest water users, 15 of our biggest parks. These locations where the irrigation system in don't have fiber, there's no Wi-Fi. To be able to control this through your iPhone, through my desktop, you need a cellular component, and it's $1,200 a month. So that is part of the increase. I believe in the savings in water that we should be able to gain from this, and just the labor savings. Now, when we have a rain event, we can shut the system off right from our computer. We don't have to go to 15 different locations, turn it off, turn it on. It's very convenient and very efficient. Very happy with the way that's working. The other increase is due to just dues and memberships. A lot of the staff, we have a pesticide license. We have to take recertification trainings through that and renew our license every 3 years with 12 credits. 61 is just the increase is due to cost supplies, just a general increase in those costs. And 71, that's for equipment. We have about $738,000 in equipment in the Parks and Rec Department that does not meet the threshold for SURF. Last year, it was worked out that we were able to get some money through the escrow process. And moving forward, I'd like to make sure that this is in our budget permanently so that we can stay current with the equipment that we have. If you look at the equipment we have now, a lot of it's antiquated, it's dated, it's old. You know, decreases our efficiency tremendously when these things break down and we have to replace them. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? of Parks and Rec? Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. I did have some questions around your fiscal year 24 objectives. First, a comment. The second one there is St. Andrews Park playground installation. Being from Ward 9, obviously, I just want to say thank you for that. That's just a great step forward for that neighborhood, and I appreciate that. My question comes around the Stone House at Greeley Park. Are those funds in building and grounds maintenance? Is that where those renovations would be funded from?
Carolyn O'Connor, Senior Finance and Administration Manager. Those would come under a capital item. And
Capital.
The design and review right now is already been funded, that portion of it.
Okay. So that is in, sorry, follow up, please.
No, follow up, go ahead.
Those capital expenditures, that's in a completely separate budget? That doesn't sit here?
It's on another page.
Oh, it is.
But that stone house has already been funded, so it's not captured in this book. It was
Okay.
funded, I think last year?
It's not an FY24 expenditure.
Oh, it's not. It's already been funded in a previous fiscal year, and now they're just
Correct.
doing it this year?
Correct.
One more, please?
Sure.
One
Go
more
ahead.
question?
I want to make sure that I'm clear for you, Alderman Sullivan. The renovations have not been funded. Right now, we're doing the design. So we will, at some point, based on whatever the cost is going to be, need to fund the actual renovation of the stone house. I wanted to make sure you understood that.
Okay, so what's been funded is the study
Is-
on how much it would cost, on what needs to be done, right? That's been funded.
And hopefully the architecture work that needs to be done.
Okay, so then once that feedback comes back, then you would need to fund the actual work.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so So typically, the architect's going to determine what they think needs to be done, and then has to go to a construction company to price the work.
Okay. One more?
Sure.
please. I noticed, excuse me. No, I lost my place, but there was mentioned somewhere, oh yeah, here it is, secure funding to renovate home and stadium improvements. I was going through the trust funds and I noticed that there is $78,000 in the home and stadium trust fund. And I didn't know if either that was funded in this budget or if those funds would be used to fund that objective.
If only that would work. We estimate that the Holman renovations will be somewhere around between $6 and $9 million.
Oh, wow, okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't know if
Never
you
mind.
noticed, if you noticed when you were there were a lot of cracks in the foundations around around the stands, so.
I was so overcome with how green the grass was that I didn't look at the foundation. Next time I'm there.
You made the
check it out.
superintendent's night by saying that.
Thank you, Alderman Sullivan.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Conant, this might be a better question for Ms. O'Connor, but the other night we did have a conversation on Los Amigos Park, which I think is outstanding. But I understand through Mr. Sullivan and Community Development that they were able to get some grant funding. And Mr. Sullivan said that perhaps maybe some of those fundings or like and everything can be applied to other parks structure as well. And so looking at that, is that a tappable resource that we have done in the past or look to do in the future? And if not, if it's a new idea, maybe we should take a peek into it and see that we can coordinate with Director Sullivan and see if we could get some funding to assist with your budget.
Referring to CDBG funds?
Yeah.
We have, in fact, we're using some for Sandy Pond right now to
Oh,
build a
good.
new dock.
Good.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, Alderman.
I have
Karen?
several questions, if you don't mind. Do you have any vacancies within your department?
We have two currently, just two recently retired individuals, so
Oh.
we should replace, fill those positions fairly quickly.
Okay. The other thing, your pool staff, were you able to hire enough lifeguards for the 3 pools?
Yes, this year.
Okay.
Last year, we were a little short. I hear the numbers, I forget the exact numbers, but we have a pretty healthy number of lifeguards this year.
Okay. There should be at least 24.
I think I've heard
I
30.
believe we're shooting for 26.
Yeah.
And I think we have them, but it's a challenge.
What are you paying them?
Currently,
Is it 18?
Anywhere between,
17.
there's sort of, there are different, there are pool coordinators and other things, but anywhere between, it's, I believe, 15 and 20.
Okay, 15. I have one more. In looking through this, I know we have basketball and baseball games. Where is the account that you pay your officials? In here, how do you pay your officials? Your umpires and your referees?
There. Carolyn O'Connor, Senior Finance and Administration Manager, under wages, game officials, under 51 salaries and wages, 51420.
Yeah, I see it. Unfortunately, it's too small for us old people. And finally, my last question, is there anything that you were looking to appropriate that you didn't get?
Yes, we were looking to appropriate more money in the tree maintenance account. We get several requests for hazardous tree removal along the roadways. In talking to the legal department, they had told us that the city, if we find a hazardous tree and are notified of a hazardous tree, look into it and deem it hazardous within the right-of-way, we are responsible for taking down that tree. Currently, right now, we have $10,000 in this line item. You'll see that as of 3/31, it was already $3,000 over. So
You were looking for,
we were looking for an additional $10,000.
Yeah, there's a number of trees around the city that.
Yes.
Some of them are dead, some of them are hanging over and ready to fall, so. And you just had one, as I was talking earlier, you had one fall on Tinker Road, you guys had to go out and clean it up. So that also comes out of that account. And it's not enough, because
Oh, I
it's
know.
very expensive to remove a tree.
I just wanted to speak to that. So $10,000 does very little in the way of tree removal. And Risk has budgeted money in their budget for tree removal. So I'm confident that at least we'll have some money to deal with the most hazardous trees. So I feel comfortable, cutting the 10,000. It wouldn't do a lot for us anyway.
If a tree is in danger of falling across power lines, Eversource has the right and does cut down the trees without asking. They don't have to ask, they can cut them down. And they're a little behind right now, because there's some that need to come down. They're marked, but
Yep.
that's not our expense, that's their expense. But
Right.
there are others that, if they're not gonna hit a power line, Eversource could care less.
that's true, that's true. Don't.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So, I'm curious, you mentioned another cell phone tower at Holman,
Yes.
so this would be a third?
Yes. Well, currently, right now, there's one, but I think it has multiple, I don't know what you want to call them, satellites or on top of there, so.
Okay, so you're challenging my powers of observation. I was there the other night.
So
and
two?
I saw two.
Oh, yeah, there is two.
Two towers with,
That's right.
But they had different arrays on them. One belongs to one company, one belongs to another company, so both companies are paying.
right, but now we're gonna put a third.
Yeah, and that's going to be in left field.
Okay, and so there are that many companies that need,
Oh, yeah, don't you get all those ads?
I'm sorry?
I said, don't you get all those ads? AT&T, there's a bunch of them. Anyway,
Okay,
any other questions?
yes, if I
Yeah,
could.
Alderman Jettie?
So, I know the Silver Knights are, a great asset for the city. I'm just, but it is a profit-making company. And, we're not the only city that hosts a team in that league. Can you assure us that we're getting an appropriate, our arrangement with the Silver Knights is appropriate for the market, that we're getting, what, as much as we should get from their use of the stadium?
Brian Conant, Superintendent of Parks and Recreation. I think the Silver Knights are a great partner. Just recently, they purchased a walk-in freezer. It was about a $45,000 investment. I had some conversations with Mr. Creedon. I've been impressed. I feel that they are a good partner, if that answers your question. So, could it be something grander? Maybe, but, the facility's not there yet. So I think with the state that the current facility is in, we should be very happy with that we have someone there, to be perfectly honest with you. So,
Okay. Yeah, my question wasn't about the quality of the Creedon family. It was more in comparison to other parks that are hosting a team in that league. Are they paying as much to us as other teams are paying to other places?
and I'm not familiar with what other municipalities charge. I know we charge about, I believe it's $1,000 a game. So that's something I guess I could look into, Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, it would seem like for the future, it would seem like a good piece of knowledge to have.
Absolutely.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question that goes back to Nick Caggiano.
Who?
Who,
Are you looking at me?
a former position in your, at that, years ago, supposedly we had money to paint those poles, and they're still not painted. They're all rusted, the light poles at Holman. I thought we had the funds lined up to paint those.
Lisa Photo, Director of Public Works, I don't know that I think we did look at that at one time, that was a long time ago, but those poles really need to be replaced. Those are,
That's a bigger expense,
that is a bigger expense, but they need to be replaced.
so.
I think we found Alderman Dow that it wasn't worth investing the money to have them painted.
So we looked into what a replacement cost would be for those poles?
We have, I don't have that number, do you?
We have, I'm very familiar. $790,000, Alderman Dowd.
Part of the 6 to 9 million I was referring to.
So there's a chunk of bucks.
So, and those would be LED lights, just like the lights that we installed at Labine. So,
Oh,
be nice to have the same thing at Holman.
yeah.
Could we put a cell tower on each one of those poles?
Well, if you put a good model up, yeah, to get one that can handle them weight-wise. Because the ones, the whole cells right now are much stronger. Sure, Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. I actually just wanted to ask around the Holman, just came from there. It's such a treasure in our city. I love it. Love taking my kids there. So the 6-9 million, that's not in this budget, is that correct?
No, it's not.
And do you have a plan for how you might fund it?
I do not.
Is there any opportunity with it being a historic place for us to potentially get grant money or federal funding, that kind of thing?
So I actually have been talking with our grant writer Pamela Davies about that, and also soccer fields. So she's looking into that. We haven't found anything right now, but that doesn't mean that there won't be something in the future.
Okay, great.
As of this evening, it's now on the Heritage Trail,
Yes.
and it's the stadium where integrated baseball started in 1946. So it may be eligible for something.
Great sense of premise.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Solid Waste Fund. It's on page 207.
Lisa Photo, Director of Public Works. As I mentioned, Superintendent LaFleur is on vacation. So for revenue, really the only change there is our cover revenue, material revenue, and that is because we've been bringing in more material as we have to fill the setbacks for our Phase 3 landfill. Other than that, the revenue's the same. I also noticed that our transfer from the general fund is not in here, and that's $6,450,353 this year.
Thought I saw that somewhere.
On line 54, property services, we have an increase in janitorial services. That is the portion of solid waste, which is $8,640. We have a reduction in our AVL of $616. Our vehicle repairs and maintenance is $14,279, an increase, as our fleet manager mentioned, due to the increase in parts. And we're having long lead times, and I know Mike is being creative and trying to fabricate stuff at times to get us by. So we have a very talented welder right now, and so they're being very creative. 55, other contracted services. We've added $50,000 to that for groundwater testing that we're going to need to do for our permit, things like PFAS and other contaminants that DES will be requiring us to test for. 61, supplies and materials. We've added $53,885 in our diesel line. This is historical data and projected increases in cost of diesel fuel. And those are really the only increases. And I entertain any questions.
Questions on landfill? Alderman Sullivan?
Yes, thank you. Could you please, I was just looking at the line item 81, capital outlay and improvements. Could you please talk more about that? Just explain that a little, just because specifically capital improvements goes from 7 million down to 700,000. And everything else, well, vehicles goes down. Could you just talk around that a little bit more, please?
Sure, so in fiscal year '23, we had our GPS system that we put on our compactor, which is great. That really helps us to understand the compaction rate better and save space. The landfill Phase 3 zigzag design and construction, that was a design that we wanted to implement that was going to help us to get additional airspace out of our Phase 3 landfill. It turned out that the cost was much higher than we anticipated, so we're only doing a portion of that zigzag. So I believe it's 1.5 million?
Yeah,
I think 1.5 million of that 5 million that we'll be doing of the zigzag. And then the other thing is the soil wall. I'm looking at this print is so small. Yeah, so the soil wall is something that we are required to build from our permit, because we need to be 500 feet from the residence. So we have to continue basically to build this block, and then we have to fill it with materials, non-contaminated materials.
Right.
So it is a line, it's unfortunate because it is a line section of the landfill, but it still needs to be filled
Okay,
because of its proximity to residences.
okay.
And then, so those were just large capital projects that were planned for fiscal '23. And then in fiscal '24, we have fewer projects. We have $200,000 for recycling area upgrades. If you're at the landfill, the areas that we put in our TVs and the motor oil, all of that, that building really needs some help and some repairs. So that's what that is for. And then the $500,000 is for Phase 3, which will be closing eventually, and Phase 4 engineering and oversight to produce the construction documents. Once we have the construction documents, we hope to be able to go out to bid, and we hope to be under construction within 1.5 years or 2 years for the Phase 4 landfill, which will give us another 40 years or so of airspace.
Great.
That's it. Alderwoman Kelly?
So you'll see this probably go up significantly in the next year or two. Hope, maybe not next year, in fiscal '25, but in fiscal '26, the latest, you'll see, a significant increase because we'll be now constructing the Phase 4 landfill.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you. I have two questions. One's easy, I think. The budget adjustment at 90, is that just did you choose to do a bottom line cut?
I'm sorry, the
Page
what?
208, 90 budget adjustments, negative 200,000.
Carolyn O'Connor, Senior Finance and Administration Manager. That is the funds that we transfer expenses out that are eligible for the Reclamation Trust Fund.
Okay, thank you. And then if I could,
Yep.
so my bigger question, perhaps Director Photo or some of the other department heads, is we hear a lot at these meetings around maintenance and, aging, pieces in our city. So I'm wondering if, Director Photo, in your time that you've been here, where is that line of keeping our maintenance so lean that we end up having to outlay a lot for capital improvements later on?
Are you referring to equipment or?
I think I'm referring to everything. I think it's a reoccurring theme that we hear, where we're trying to keep budget sensible, but we oftentimes pull our deferred maintenance or those types of things back, and that's where we cut from, and then we end up with $6 million in Holman upgrades that we need to take care of.
So I think there's two questions. I think with our vehicles, when I first started 14 years ago now, I think I just celebrated my anniversary. Wish me happy anniversary. Our equipment was just held together with duct tape and wire, and I'm not exaggerating. It was horrible. Former Mayor Loza would tell you that we worried about whether we're going to pick up trash. It was that bad. And so we've come a long way, and we have a replacement schedule, we've been following that, and so I think our equipment is in very good shape. As far as building maintenance goes, I don't think we score quite so well. I don't think we have a very good plan on maintaining our city buildings. I think that could be better. We certainly are putting in a good plan for our new building. Alderman Dowd, Alderman O'Brien can attest to that, but
Yep.
I think, you know, our gems like Holman Stadium have been allowed to get in disrepair, and so I think we're gonna have to make some tough decisions in the coming years on how we're going to repair these facilities.
Thank you.
All set. Alderman Jennings?
Yeah, so, you know, this may not be the appropriate time to ask these questions, but if you'll indulge me, you know, there's been a lot of, I've read a lot recently about, you know, when we talk about recycling, there's been a big push to get people to you know, use things longer or reuse things, and, you know, kind of avoid throwing things away to begin with, you know, as far as,
Right.
that's part of the recycling formula, reuse stuff. A lot of communities, and I think we used to, you know, have, you know, a place where people can, you know, a recliner that still usable, but, you know, they're remodeling or whatever, so they bring furniture or whatever to the transfer station in these small towns, and other people come and look at it and take it away, and it doesn't end up in the landfill. I know we used to do that, and we stopped at some point, and I'm wondering, I know Superintendent LaFleur isn't here, but, you know, do you have a sense of, you know, how much, you know, stuff like that, furniture and appliances, and those types of things are ending up in the landfill? And you know, would it be appropriate to kind of reconsider, you know, whether or not we could provide a place where people could exchange these types of things?
So Lisa Photo, Director of Public Works, we had a swap shop, and in fact, my first meeting as Superintendent of Solid Waste, I was tasked with closing it. It was awful. I mean, we had to have a police officer there. I mean, people were taking things out of each other's trunks, golf clubs that, you know, they weren't planning on donating. It was rough. So we'd have to fund it. We'd have to have staffing there to watch over it. That's something we certainly could revisit, but at the time we didn't have any staff. Right now we wouldn't have any staff to staff it, so we'd have to hire some staff to be able to keep an eye on it. Our Scott Perkins is our recycling administrator, and he does a pretty good job of. There are a number of sites that there's FreeCycle. There's a number of other places that we recommend people bring their things to that, you know, that are sort of gently used, that could be reused. We do try to donate things that come in that we see that are still in good working order. We try to donate them to help those in need. But there are a lot of online type of swap shops that can be utilized rather than, you know, the taxpayers funding something at the landfill.
Okay, thank you. Something to think about.
It is something, absolutely, it is something we could look into.
Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. I just wanted to reply that there's actually Nashua Community Sharing and Giving is a Facebook group that I'm in, and they're very moderated, and that's what the whole goal is, to be able to give away gently used. So people are listening and like that idea. It's a nice place, and I've been able to, you know, give and take a little bit there.
Thank you for mentioning that. And we do have a number of sites, and I don't know if that's one of them, but we should have had it if it's not, on our website, on the solid waste website for that purpose.
The other thing is, I think I've said this before, if any of the aldermen have not had a tour of the landfill, Mr. LaFleur will give you a tour in his truck, And it's not as simple as just taking a truck out there and dumping stuff. Everything is GPS controlled. Every square inch is GPS controlled. And including when they're doing the filling and this tamping down. It's quite the operation. There's a number of different areas out there for, you know, brush recycling and all kinds of other recycling. So it's a very interesting tour if you ever get a chance to go out and see it, because it's not just trucks dumping things inadvertently. And the fills going in there to cap it off every night are huge trucks, as we've seen in our meetings. So, just want to break that out. Okay, then we'll move on. If nobody has any other questions, we'll move on to Department 169 wastewater user fund.
Dave Boucher, wastewater superintendent. On the revenue page, 214, we have an increase in state reimbursements. Increase there is based on capital projects finished and approved. There's also an increase in the Hudson capital contributions. This is adjusted annually based on facility expenditures. Town of Hudson pays a % contribution to the wastewater plant related projects. And a decrease in the general obligation bond proceeds. So this is directly related to the calculated projects we have scheduled for fiscal year '24. And going on to the appropriations, page 216, on line 51, I have increases in wages and salaries. Some of these are contractual obligations. I also have an increase to fund an additional foreman position. Over the years, we've added a couple collection positions to help meet regulations out in the collection systems. We have to meet regulations that require us to maintain the system, clean it, repair, which is requiring one of my two foremen to be out in the street more often, leaving just one foreman in the facility. We have an operations crew within the facility. We also have a maintenance crew within the facility, which also has electricians. So it's a bit of a burden for just one foreman to be inside the facility. So we're proposing to add another foreman. Line 54, we have increases in the janitorial services. This is due to a facility cleaning contract for our administration building. We also have disposal services increase. This is for the disposal of our biosolids. This is a contractual increase. We also have increase in equipment repairs and maintenance, just like the other departments. We're mostly seeing the increases in pump parts and specialty parts that we purchase for the wastewater facility. And line 55, you'll see an increase. That's over on page 217. Other contracted services. We have increases in our specialty services, subcontractors that maintain our HVAC system, generators, boilers. These are companies that have the proper computer programs that my mechanics don't have to service these, but we're seeing an increase in those costs as well. Under line 61, supplies and materials. We have a major increased cost in chemicals at the facility. These are all the chemicals we use to treat our process on a daily basis. Hypochlorite, bisulfite, polymers. And in 81, line 81, capital outlay improvements. There's a decrease there that's based off of calculations on capital projects scheduled for fiscal year '24. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No questions?
I have,
Oh, Alderman Jennings?
yeah, thank you. So, Mr. Boucher, I noticed that at the Board of Public Works meetings and the Finance Committee meetings, you seem to be the most popular attendant there. So every time you go before the Board of Public Works asking for money to do something, or the Finance Committee, is that stuff that's already been put into your budget and you're just going to
Yes,
get approval to
correct.
pay the bill?
Like the chemicals, like recently I just went for chemical purchase for the new fiscal year.
Okay. And so the, wastewater is a separate fund. So how do people get billed for that? Where do the taxpayers see that? Is it part of their water bill, or is it?
Yeah, it's an enterprise fund based off of the sewer rates, so it's a portion of, it's based off of your water consumption and meter size also. So everyone's individually billed, whoever's connected to the system, who uses the sewer services. We also bill for septic we receive as well.
Okay. And could I follow?
Hold on.
So is that part of their Penachuk bill, or do they get a separate bill from wastewater?
I think they receive the Penachuk bill, so they know the water usage, and the sewer is based off of the consumption.
No. Carolyn O'Connor,
Carolyn.
Senior Manager, Finance and Administration. The Penachuk is separate. The only thing we receive from them is the water consumption, which is then used towards the billing that's done through the city. And it's done on an average, and that was decided years ago because of people who have irrigation systems and things. So they use the winter average of water consumption, and that's how they are able to bill. But it's not billed through Penachuk, it's billed through the city.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right. Any other general questions for Department of Public Works? Yes.
Thank you.
Alderman
Director Photo, I alluded earlier to the expendable trust funds, and I think I stopped counting at about 20 different trust funds that sit under Public Works. And I noticed that there were some with very low balances in them, and going through all of the departments tonight, I don't specifically seeing any call-outs, transfer of money into those trust funds. And then since CFO Griffin is here, maybe he could chime in as well, but I was just curious, is that typically how it happens? Is that how the money is appropriated? You have to put it in your line, in your budget, to make sure it gets transferred into a specific trust fund?
No, it doesn't, at least the photo director of Public Works, it doesn't necessarily need to come into our budget. It could be appropriated directly into one of the trust funds. It wouldn't normally come into our budget and then into a trust fund. It would go directly there. So some of the trust funds, they're all different. Some were set up by a donation. There's cell tower accounts that we have. Mine Falls, the skate park has a cell tower account that funds any maintenance for that. So they're all different. There's a Greeley fund that was set up years ago by a grant. So they're all a little bit different. We do have like a park rehabilitation fund. I think we may actually be transferring money into that for the park rehabilitation this year. But that's a common one if we want to do something like St. Andrew's Park, or I think we transferred for the Libyan lights into that fund. So when we have projects that we want to do, we often will transfer to those funds.
Okay.
Mr. Griffin, did you want to add anything? Since we've had discussions about consolidating some of these and closing some out.
Sure, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. They certainly have taken on a life of their own. And I can understand Alderman Sullivan looking at them and wondering, when is any of this stuff going to be spent? But it's hard to close them because they had a good purpose when they started. But what Director Photo was talking about, we do have what's called interfund transfers, which is something that I'll be speaking about on Thursday, but page 223, that's where the cell tower revenues get transferred into the Holman Stadium, David Dean Skate Park, and Mines Falls. As you recall, last year, there was a movement to, as Director Photo said, to move monies into the Park Rehabilitation Expendable Trust Fund, and that can be done through appropriation. Generally, in the budget, most of the departments don't carry a line item that says transfer to. A lot of times it's done through the escrow process, which is a good use of an escrow, actually putting money in i.e. a savings account. Escrow should be used for capital projects and expendable trust fund build up, not for ongoing expenses, but you can replenish these funds and use them as the board prefers. We've got several contributions that were received over the years, so that's an array of a couple of pages at the end of the book, and then the expendable trust funds funded by appropriations. So there's a handful of money there. Not sure if we cobble everything together and just use it on one item, such as the Holman Stadium renovation, $6 to $9 million. I'll talk a lot about that issue on Thursday as well, because it certainly crops up. You've had several departments that have come to you, and they really don't have an answer as to where to get the money, and the only way you can really do it here is to fund it, bond it, and really take a hard look at the capital improvement committee project that we do, because we do a lot of hard work in that committee. But when you end up with a 6-year program that's $500 million, it's scary. But we can talk about a lot about that Thursday too. But hopefully that answers the question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. What?
Hopefully that answers your
Yes, yeah.
immediate question. Thank you.
And if nobody figured it out, finances Thursday. And I've looked at the expendable trust a number of times, and to understand each one of them, you gotta go dig the legislation out that formed it, tells you where you can get money from it, how it can be expended, who can expend it. There's a sort of a summary of that in this book, if you look in the back. But it's, we've had a couple times we were gonna sit down and see what we could do about getting rid of some of them, but it's an effort unto itself, so. Any other general questions? If not, don't get the wrong one now.
No, I'll get it right.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to table R 23-125, which is the pending budget.
Motion on the floor is to table R 23-125, the budget, till the next meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. General discussion? Seeing none. Public comment? No public. Remarks by Alderman? Alderman Gelli.
I'll make it quick. I know everybody's excited to get out of here. I wanted to congratulate the Black Heritage Trail and the Greater Nashville NAACP and the city for the great ceremony, and I know many of you were there, but it was really, it's such a sense of pride to tell everybody that Nashville was the first integrated baseball stadium. So it's nice going from there to here to talk about how an important piece of our history that is. And then I wanted to thank everyone for letting us get out on a reasonable time. It is our wedding anniversary this evening, so my husband will be happy that I'm not here till midnight.
Yeah.
13 years. So.
Happy anniversary.
Taylor Swift's favorite number.
I'm sorry?
Alderman Dowd is a Swiftie.
I think the chairperson should have had a cake or something.
You heard it, yeah, it's on the record.
All right. If there's no other comments, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make the motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 8:19 PM.